The war surgeon's hands were steady even as the ground shook from another volley of cannon fire, and Xander Owens knew that if he looked up from the orc woman bleeding out on his operating table, he would lose his nerve entirely. Blood pooled beneath her massive frame, soaking through the canvas stretched across the wooden planks he had fashioned into a makeshift surgical station. The field hospital tent offered little protection from the chaos outside, where human and orc forces clashed in a battle that had already claimed hundreds of lives. Xander had been working for 16 hours straight, stitching wounds and amputating limbs, watching men die despite his best efforts. But this was different. This orc woman was not supposed to be here. She was the enemy. She had been dragged into the tent by 2 soldiers who had found her collapsed in a drainage ditch half a mile from the front lines. They had assumed she was human at first in the darkness and smoke, but when they got her into the lamplight, they had drawn their weapons and prepared to finish her off. Xander had stepped between them and the dying woman without thinking, his voice sharp with exhaustion and something else he could not name. "Get out," he had told them. "I will treat her." They had stared at him like he had lost his mind, but eventually they had left, muttering about treason and sympathizers. Now, Xander was alone with the orc woman, and he was trying to save her life even though he knew it would likely cost him his career and possibly his freedom. Military law was clear. Enemy combatants were not to receive medical treatment. They were to be interrogated if conscious, executed if mortally wounded, or imprisoned if stable enough to transport. Saving an orc's life violated every protocol he had sworn to uphold when he joined the medical corps 3 years ago. But as Xander's fingers worked to tie off a severed artery in her abdomen, as he watched her chest rise and fall in shallow, struggling breaths, he could not think of her as the enemy. She was just another person whose body had been torn apart by the machinery of war, and he had spent too many years trying to put broken bodies back together to stand by and let another one die when he had the skill to prevent it. The wound was catastrophic. A cannonball fragment had torn through her left side, shredding muscle and perforating her intestines in 3 places. She had lost enough blood that her green skin had taken on a grayish pallor, and her pulse was weak and thready beneath his fingers. Xander worked with methodical precision, repairing the intestinal damage first, then moving to the muscles and blood vessels. His medical training had been thorough, and he had learned early in the war that hesitation killed patients faster than wounds did. Hours passed. Outside, the sounds of battle gradually faded, replaced by the groans of the wounded and the shouted orders of officers organizing the aftermath. Xander ignored it all, focused entirely on the woman before him. He irrigated the wound cavity with boiled water and alcohol, checking for any debris that might cause infection. He stitched layers of tissue back together with careful, even sutures, the way his mentor had taught him during his apprenticeship in the medical college in the capital. By the time he tied off the final external suture and bandaged the wound, dawn light was filtering through the gaps in the tent canvas. Xander sat back on his stool and wiped the sweat from his forehead with the back of his arm. His hands were shaking now that the work was done, delayed shock catching up to him. The orc woman was still unconscious, but her breathing had stabilized and her pulse was stronger. She might actually survive. The realization sent a complicated surge of emotions through him, relief mixed with dread. What the hell was he going to do now? He looked at her face for the first time since beginning the surgery. She was younger than he had initially thought, probably in her early 20s. Her features were strong, with high cheekbones and a broad jaw. Small tusks protruded from her lower lip, white against her green skin. Her hair was black and thick, braided into a long rope that hung off the side of the operating table. She was beautiful in a way that surprised him, though he supposed beauty was a strange thing to notice about someone who had nearly died on his table. A voice outside the tent made him jerk to his feet. Major Clifton, the commanding officer of the medical corps, pushed through the tent flap with 2 armed guards behind him. His expression was thunderous. "Dr. Owens," Clifton said, his voice clipped and cold. "I have received reports that you are harboring an enemy combatant in this hospital." I dismissed them as battlefield rumors until I came to see for myself. Xander straightened his spine and met the major's gaze. "Sir, I found a critically wounded patient and performed emergency surgery. That is my duty as a physician." "Your duty is to our soldiers, not to orc scum," Clifton snapped. "This is treason, Owens. You will be court-martialed for this." "I took an oath to preserve life, sir. That oath does not distinguish between human and orc." Clifton's face turned red. "Your oath is to your king and your country." "This creature would have killed any one of our men without hesitation. She does not deserve your mercy." Xander felt something harden in his chest, a resolve that surprised him with its strength. "Perhaps not, sir, but I am not the one who decides what people deserve. I only decide whether I can save them, and I could save her, so I did." For a moment, he thought Clifton might order the guards to arrest him on the spot. But then the major seemed to deflate slightly, exhaustion showing through his anger. The battle had been brutal for everyone, and Clifton had lost dozens of men under his command. He rubbed his face with one hand and sighed. "You are a damned fool, Owens," he said finally. "But you are also the best surgeon I have, and I cannot afford to lose you. The orc woman will be transferred to the prisoner compound as soon as she is stable enough to move. You will have no further contact with her. If you protest, I will have you arrested. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir," Xander said quietly. Clifton left with the guards, and Xander was alone with the orc woman again. He checked her vital signs and changed the dressing on her wound, then settled into a chair beside the operating table to wait. He told himself he was only staying to monitor her condition, but the truth was more complicated. He wanted to know if she would wake up. He wanted to see her open her eyes. It was another full day before she regained consciousness. Xander had managed a few hours of sleep in between treating other patients, but he kept returning to check on her. Her fever had spiked during the night, and he had spent hours sponging her skin with cool water to bring her temperature down. By the second morning, the fever had broken, and he found her eyes open when he came to change her bandages. She stared at him with eyes the color of dark amber, and for a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then she tried to sit up, gasped in pain, and fell back against the table. Xander moved quickly to support her shoulders. "Do not move," he said firmly. "You have been seriously injured. The sutures will tear if you are not careful." She looked at him with confusion and something else, something that might have been fear. Her gaze moved to the tent around them, taking in the medical supplies and the other empty operating tables. Then she looked down at herself, at the bandages wrapped around her torso, and her expression shifted to understanding. "Why did you save me?" she asked, her voice rough and low. Xander had been expecting the question, but hearing it still struck him with unexpected force. He met her eyes and said simply, "Because I am a doctor. It is what I do." She studied him for a long moment, and he could see the wheels turning in her mind, trying to make sense of the situation. "I am your enemy," she said. "You were dying," he replied. "That made you my patient." She shook her head slightly, wincing at the movement. "Humans do not save orcs. You should have let me die. It would have been easier for both of us." "Probably," Xander admitted. "But I did not become a surgeon to take the easy path." A flicker of something that might have been respect crossed her face. She closed her eyes briefly, and when she opened them again, they were harder, more guarded. What will happen to me now? You will be taken to the prisoner compound once you are strong enough to be moved. After that, I do not know. Prisoner exchanges, perhaps, or internment until the war ends. The war will not end, she said flatly. It has been going on for 3 generations. It will keep going until one side or the other is wiped out. Xander had no answer to that. She was probably right. The conflict between humans and orcs had begun long before he was born, rooted in territorial disputes and old hatreds that no one seemed interested in resolving. He turned away to prepare a dose of willow bark tea for her pain. "What is your name?" he asked as he handed her the cup. She hesitated, then said, "Gretna." "I am Xander." He watched as she drank the tea, her hands steady despite her weakness. "How did you end up in that ditch, Gretna?" "I was part of a scouting party. We were caught in your artillery barrage. The others died. I tried to reach our lines, but I collapsed." Her voice was matter-of-fact, but he could hear the grief beneath it. "I am sorry," he said, and meant it. She looked at him sharply. "Do not apologize to me for doing your job. We are at war. People die." "That does not mean I have to like it." For the first time, something that might have been a smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. "You are a strange human, Xander, so I have been told." Over the next week, Xander found reasons to check on Gretna more frequently than was strictly necessary. He told himself it was because she was a complicated case, that he needed to monitor her recovery closely to prevent infection or complications. But the truth was that he was fascinated by her. She was different from anyone he had ever met, and not just because she was an orc. There was a directness to her, an honesty that he found refreshing after years of navigating military bureaucracy and the polite lies of civilized society. She was healing quickly, faster than a human would have from such an injury. Xander had read about the superior regenerative capabilities of orc physiology in his medical texts, but seeing it in person was remarkable. By the end of the first week, she was able to sit up without assistance and eat solid food. By the end of the second, she was taking short walks around the tent with his support. They talked during these visits, brief conversations that gradually grew longer and more personal. Gretna told him about her clan, a community of hunters and warriors who lived in the mountain territories to the north. She had 3 brothers and a younger sister. Her father had been killed in the war when she was 12. Her mother was a weaver who created beautiful tapestries that told the stories of their people. Xander told her about his own life, his childhood in a small farming town, his decision to study medicine over his father's objections. His father had wanted him to take over the family farm, but Xander had always been drawn to healing. He had apprenticed with the town doctor, then won a scholarship to the medical college in the capital. The war had started during his final year of training, and he had enlisted in the medical corps because the army needed surgeons, and he needed to pay off his education debts. "You regret it?" Gretna asked one afternoon as he checked her wound. The incision was healing beautifully, the edges knitting together with minimal scarring. "Sometimes," Xander admitted. "I thought I would be helping people. I did not realize how much death I would see, how little difference I would be able to make." "You made a difference for me," she said quietly. He looked up and found her watching him with an expression he could not quite read. "I suppose I did," he said. "Why?" she asked. It was the second time she had asked the question, but this time there was a different weight to it. "You could have been executed for saving me. You risked everything. I need to understand why." Xander was quiet for a moment, trying to find the right words. "I have spent 3 years watching people die on my operating table. Humans mostly, but also orcs when they are brought in wounded and past saving. After a while, the differences stop mattering. Green skin or pale skin, tusks or no tusks, everyone bleeds the same red. Everyone dies the same way. I got tired of watching people die when I knew I could save them. So when you were brought in, I did not see an orc or an enemy. I just saw someone I could help, and I chose to help." Gretna was silent for a long time, her amber eyes searching his face. Then she reached out and touched his hand where it rested on the edge of the table. Her fingers were calloused and strong, and the contact sent an unexpected jolt through him. "Thank you," she said simply. It was the first time she had thanked him, and the sincerity in her voice made something shift in his chest. He realized with a start that he cared about her, not just as a patient but as a person. The realization should have alarmed him, but instead, it felt almost inevitable. Their time together came to an end 2 days later, when Major Clifton informed him that Gretna was being transferred to the prisoner compound the following morning. Xander felt a surge of panic that he tried to hide behind professional composure. "She is not fully healed yet," he protested. "Moving her could cause complications." "She is stable enough," Clifton said firmly. "The decision has been made, Owens. Say your goodbyes tonight if you must, but she leaves at dawn." That evening, Xander brought Gretna a final meal and sat with her as she ate. She had been quiet since he told her about the transfer, her expression closed off in a way that reminded him she was a warrior as much as a patient. "I wish I could do more," he said helplessly. "You have done more than anyone had a right to expect," she replied. "I will not forget it." "What will you do when the war ends, I mean, if it ever ends?" She looked at him with sad eyes. "Go back to my clan if they will have me, try to live a normal life." "What will you do?" "I do not know," he admitted. "I used to think I would open a practice in a small town somewhere, treat farmers and families. But after everything I have seen, I do not know if I can go back to that simple life." "Sometimes simple is good," Gretna said. "Simple means no one is trying to kill you." He laughed despite himself, and she smiled, a real smile that showed her tusks and made her whole face light up. In that moment, she was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen, and the knowledge that he would probably never see her again hit him like a physical blow. Before he could think better of it, he reached across and took her hand. She did not pull away. "If things were different," he began, then stopped, not sure how to finish the sentence. "If things were different, we would not have met," she said gently. "Sometimes the world only gives us one moment. We have to be grateful for that." "I am not feeling particularly grateful right now," he said. She squeezed his hand. "Neither am I." They sat like that until the lamps burned low, neither wanting to be the first to let go. When Xander finally left the tent, it felt like leaving a piece of himself behind. The next morning, he watched from a distance as 2 guards escorted Gretna out of the medical compound. She walked with her head high, her movements still slightly stiff from the healing wound but her bearing proud. She did not look back. Xander threw himself into his work, treating the endless stream of wounded soldiers with mechanical efficiency. He told himself that Gretna had just been another patient, that his feelings were simply the result of exhaustion and the stress of war. But at night, he lay awake in his tent and thought about amber eyes and strong hands, and a voice asking, "Why did you save me?" 3 weeks later, everything changed. Xander was awakened in the middle of the night by shouting and the sound of gunfire. He scrambled out of his tent to find the camp in chaos. An orc raiding party had attacked the supply depot, and the fighting had spread throughout the encampment. Soldiers were running in all directions, and the wounded were already being carried toward the medical tents. He was racing toward the hospital when he saw the prisoner compound had been breached. The gates hung open and bodies lay in the dirt, both guards and prisoners. His heart lurched. Without thinking, he changed direction and ran toward the compound. Inside, it was a scene of carnage. The orc raiding party had clearly targeted the compound specifically, and they were in the process of freeing the prisoners. Xander ducked behind a wagon as gunfire erupted nearby. He scanned the faces of the prisoners being led out, looking for one face in particular. He found her near the back fence. Gretna was helping an injured orc male walk, supporting his weight with her shoulder. Even from a distance, Xander could see she was moving carefully, protecting her wounded side. His medical instinct overrode his common sense, and he ran toward her. Gretna. She spun around, her eyes going wide when she saw him. Xander, what are you doing here? You need to get out of here. You are going to tear your sutures, he said, reaching them and taking the injured orc's other arm to help support him. Your wound is not fully healed. She stared at him like he had lost his mind. There is a battle happening. I am escaping. This is not the time for a medical consultation. I know that, but you need to be careful. He helped them move the injured orc toward the breach in the fence, where other freed prisoners were disappearing into the darkness. A human soldier appeared around the corner of a building, saw them, and raised his rifle. Xander acted on instinct, stepping in front of Gretna and raising his hands. Do not shoot. I am a medical officer. The soldier hesitated, confusion on his face, and in that moment, another orc from the raiding party tackled him from the side. Gretna grabbed Xander's arm and pulled him toward the fence. Come with us, she said urgently. What? I cannot. You just protected me from one of your own soldiers. Do you think they did not see that? You will be arrested for treason. You have to come with us now. Xander's mind raced. She was right. He had acted without thinking, and there had been at least a dozen witnesses to him shielding an enemy prisoner. Even if he could explain it away as a medical officer protecting a patient, the fact that he had been in the compound at all during a raid would be impossible to justify. Another burst of gunfire decided for him. Gretna pulled him through the breach in the fence, and they ran into the forest beyond the camp. Behind them, the sounds of battle continued, but no one seemed to be following them specifically. The raiding party had accomplished their objective and was retreating with the freed prisoners. They ran for what felt like hours, moving through the dark forest at a punishing pace. The injured orc had been taken by other members of the raiding party, leaving just Xander and Gretna moving together. Eventually, she called a halt in a small clearing beside a stream. Xander collapsed against a tree, his lungs burning. He was in decent physical condition from 3 years of military service, but he was not a soldier, and the adrenaline was wearing off, leaving him shaky and disoriented. Gretna knelt beside the stream and drank deeply, then splashed water on her face. When she straightened, she was holding her side and her face was tight with pain. Xander forced himself to his feet. Let me see. I am fine. You are not fine. I can see you are in pain. Let me check the wound. She sighed but lifted her shirt. The bandages were stained with fresh blood. Xander carefully peeled them away and examined the incision site by the dim starlight filtering through the trees. 2 of the sutures had torn and the wound was seeping. I need to restitch this, he said. But I do not have any supplies. There is a safe house about 2 miles north of here, Gretna said. The raiding party will regroup there. They will have medical supplies. They set out again, moving more slowly now. Gretna was clearly struggling, but she refused his offers of support with a stubborn pride that reminded him she was a warrior. When they finally reached the safe house, a cave system hidden in a rocky hillside, the other freed prisoners and the raiding party members were already there. The leader of the raiding party, a massive orc male with a scarred face and arms like tree trunks, looked at Xander with deep suspicion. Who is the human? He is the surgeon who saved my life, Gretna said firmly. He is under my protection. The leader, whose name turned out to be Thorgrim, did not look convinced, but he gestured for them to enter the cave. Inside, the freed prisoners were being tended to by a female orc who introduced herself as Mara, a healer. She looked at Xander with curiosity, but did not object when he asked for medical supplies to treat Gretna's wound. He worked by firelight, carefully removing the torn sutures and replacing them with fresh ones. Gretna sat stoically through the procedure, though he could see the tension in her jaw. When he finished, he bandaged the wound again and gave her instructions to rest for at least a day before moving. "Thank you," she said quietly, and he nodded. Over the next few days, as the group waited for it to be safe to move, Xander found himself in a surreal situation. He was the only human in a cave full of orcs, many of whom regarded him with suspicion or outright hostility. But Gretna's protection held, and gradually, some of the others warmed to him, particularly after he helped Mara treat several of the injured prisoners. Thorgrim remained wary but pragmatic. On the third day, he approached Xander while Gretna was sleeping. "She speaks well of you," the orc leader said without preamble. "She says you risked your career and possibly your life to save her." "I am a doctor," Xander said, the answer becoming automatic. "It is what I do." Humans do not usually extend that courtesy to orcs. "I am not most humans." Thorgrim studied him for a long moment. "No, I suppose you are not. What are your plans now, Xander Owens? You cannot go back to your own people." "I do not know," Xander admitted. It was the truth. He had been so focused on escaping, and then on treating Gretna, that he had not thought about what came next. "I suppose I will have to find somewhere new to go. A neutral territory, maybe, or a town far from the war." "Or you could come with us," Thorgrim said. Xander blinked in surprise. "With you? To orc territory? Gretna's clan is in the northern mountains. We are taking the freed prisoners back to their various homes. Her clan is one of the largest and most stable in the region. They could use a skilled healer, especially one trained in surgical techniques." Thorgrim paused, then added, "And Gretna seems to want you there, though she has not said so directly." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I owe Gretna a debt. She saved my son's life during a raid 2 years ago. If she wants you with her clan, then I will help make that happen. But I need to know if you are serious about leaving your old life behind. You would not be welcome among humans again, not after helping us escape. The question is whether you can build a new life among orcs." Xander looked across the cave to where Gretna lay sleeping, her face peaceful in the firelight. He thought about the moment in the tent when she had taken his hand, about the way she had looked at him when she asked why he saved her. He thought about the emptiness he had felt watching her walk away into the prisoner compound, and the surge of relief when he saw her during the raid. "I think I can," he said quietly. Thorgrim nodded. "Then you will come with us when we leave tomorrow." The journey to the northern mountains took nearly 2 weeks. The group traveled carefully, avoiding human settlements and patrols, moving through remote wilderness areas. Xander found himself falling into the rhythm of the journey, learning to read the forest the way the orcs did, to move quietly and efficiently. Gretna stayed close to him, partly to continue his protection, but also, he thought, because she wanted to. They talked more during the journey, long conversations during rest stops and quiet evenings around the campfire. He learned about orc culture, about their complex clan structures and honor codes, about their history and myths. She learned about human medicine and science, about the medical college where he had trained, about the books he had read, and the discoveries being made in anatomy and disease treatment. "Your people have accomplished much in the sciences," Gretna said one evening. "It is a shame we are too busy killing each other to share that knowledge. Perhaps someday that will change," Xander said, though he did not really believe it. "Perhaps," she agreed, but she sounded as doubtful as he felt. As they traveled further into orc territory, Xander began to notice subtle changes in Gretna. She seemed more relaxed, more herself. The careful guard she had maintained in the human camp fell away, and he saw glimpses of who she was when she was not constantly watching her back. She laughed more easily, joked with the other orcs in the group, and showed a wry humor that he found delightful. He also noticed the way some of the other orcs looked at her, with respect and affection that spoke of her standing in her community. She was not just a warrior, he realized. She was someone important, someone who mattered to her people. When they finally reached the territory of her clan, the settlement was larger than Xander had expected. It was not a city, but a sizable village, with sturdy wooden buildings arranged around a central square. Fields of crops stretched out on terraced hillsides, and he could see orchards and livestock pens. It looked like a thriving community, not the savage camp he had been taught to expect from orc settlements. Gretna's return was met with celebration. Her mother, a handsome older orc woman with silver threads in her black hair, embraced her daughter with tears running down her face. Her siblings crowded around, all of them taller and broader than Gretna, all of them clearly relieved to have her home. Xander hung back, feeling out of place, but Gretna pulled him forward and introduced him to her family. "This is Xander," she said. "He saved my life. He is a healer and he has nowhere else to go. I want him to stay with our clan." Her mother, whose name was Helka, looked at Xander with shrewd eyes. "A human healer who saved my daughter's life is welcome in my home," she said. "But the clan elders will have to approve him staying permanently." "I will speak to them," Gretna said firmly. The next few days were a whirlwind of meetings and introductions. Xander met the clan elders, a group of older orcs who questioned him extensively about his skills and his reasons for being there. He demonstrated his surgical techniques on a clan member who had an infected wound, carefully debriding the damaged tissue and suturing the wound closed with techniques that clearly impressed them. He treated a child with a fever, correctly diagnosing an ear infection and providing treatment that brought the fever down within a day. Gradually, skepticism turned to cautious acceptance. The clan needed a skilled healer, and Xander's training was far beyond what their own healers could provide. The fact that Gretna vouched for him carried significant weight, and by the end of the week, the elders agreed to let him stay provisionally. He would be given a small house on the edge of the village and would be expected to provide medical care to the clan. In return, he would be protected and provided for. It was more than Xander had dared to hope for. He threw himself into his new role, setting up a proper clinic in his small house, organizing his limited supplies and beginning to see patients. The work was different from what he had done in the army, slower paced and more focused on chronic conditions and preventive care rather than trauma surgery. But it was satisfying in a way the war surgery had never been. He was helping people heal, not just keeping them alive long enough to be sent back to the front lines. Gretna visited him often, ostensibly to have him check her healing wound, but really, he thought, just to spend time with him. Her visits were the highlight of his days, moments of easy companionship that he had not realized he was starving for. They would talk for hours, about everything and nothing, and sometimes they would just sit in comfortable silence while he worked on organizing his supplies or preparing medicines. It was during one of these visits, about a month after his arrival, that things shifted between them. Gretna had stopped by in the evening after he had finished seeing patients for the day. She had brought a basket of fresh bread and cheese from her mother's kitchen, and they sat outside his house watching the sun set over the mountains. "Your wound has healed completely," Xander said, breaking the comfortable silence. "You do not need to keep coming by for checkups." Gretna looked at him, and there was something vulnerable in her amber eyes. What if I am not coming by for checkups? His heart started beating faster. Then why are you coming by? You know why, she said quietly. He did know. He had known for weeks, maybe longer. But hearing her say it out loud made it real in a way that terrified and exhilarated him in equal measure. Gretna, he began, but she interrupted him. I know this is complicated, she said. I know there are 1,000 reasons why this cannot work. Our peoples are at war. You are human and I am orc. There will be people in both our communities who will never accept it. But I do not care about any of that. I care about you. I have cared about you since you chose to save my life when you had every reason to let me die. Xander felt like his chest was going to burst. I have cared about you for just as long, he admitted. Maybe longer. From the moment you woke up and asked why I saved you, I have not been able to stop thinking about you. She smiled, that beautiful smile that lit up her whole face. So what do we do about it? I suppose we figure it out together, he said. And then he leaned forward and kissed her. Her lips were warm and soft, and she tasted like the sweet bread she had brought. She made a small sound of surprise and then kissed him back, her hand coming up to cup his face. It was gentle and tentative, both of them aware of how fragile this moment was, how easily it could be broken. When they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. Well, Gretna said, sounding slightly dazed, that was worth waiting for. Xander laughed, giddy with relief and happiness. It really was. They kept their relationship quiet at first, both aware that it would cause complications if it became public knowledge too quickly. But in a small village, secrets did not stay secret for long. Within a few weeks, it was common knowledge that Xander and Gretna were courting, and the reactions were mixed. Gretna's mother was surprisingly supportive. You are an adult, Helka told her daughter, and he is a good man who saved your life and who serves our clan well. If he makes you happy, then I am happy for you. Her siblings were more skeptical, particularly her older brother Drogath, a warrior with a fierce reputation who regarded Xander with deep suspicion. But even Drogath could not argue with the fact that Xander was a skilled healer who had already saved several lives in the clan. The clan elders were divided. Some felt that allowing a human into the clan was dangerous enough without him forming a romantic attachment to one of their own. Others argued that Xander had proven his loyalty by leaving his own people to live among orcs, and that his relationship with Gretna should be his own business. The debate came to a head during a clan council meeting 3 months after Xander's arrival. He was called to speak before the elders and asked to defend his presence and his relationship with Gretna. He stood in the center of the council circle, surrounded by skeptical faces, and spoke from the heart. I know I am an outsider, he said. I know my presence here is unusual and uncomfortable for many of you, but I did not come here to cause trouble or to disrupt your community. I came here because I had nowhere else to go, and because Gretna offered me a place. In the time I have been here, I have done everything I can to be useful, to contribute to the clan, to prove that I belong. I have treated your sick and injured. I have shared my knowledge freely. And yes, I have fallen in love with Gretna because she is the most remarkable person I have ever met. I cannot change what I am or where I came from, but I can promise you that I will spend every day trying to be worthy of the trust you have placed in me by letting me stay. There was silence when he finished. Then Gretna stood up from where she had been sitting with the other clan members. I also have something to say, she announced. Xander saved my life when he had every reason to let me die. He risked everything to give me a second chance. He gave up his career, his home, his entire life among his own people because helping me made him a traitor in their eyes. If that is not proof of his character, then I do not know what is. I love him, and I intend to bind myself to him if he will have me. If the clan cannot accept that, Then I will leave and make a life with him elsewhere." Her mother gasped, and several of the elders exchanged shocked looks. Binding was the orcish equivalent of marriage, a permanent commitment recognized by the entire clan. For Gretna to announce her intention to bind herself to a human was unprecedented. One of the oldest elders, a woman named Vorna with more scars than Xander could count, spoke up. "You would leave your clan for this human." "I would," Gretna said without hesitation. "But I hope I do not have to. This is my home. These are my people. I want to build my life here with Xander. But if I must choose between my clan and the man I love, I will choose him." Xander felt his throat tighten with emotion. He had not expected her to make such a declaration, and the weight of it hit him hard. Vorna was quiet for a long moment. Then she nodded slowly. "Your loyalty to each other is clear, and perhaps that is what matters most. This world is changing, whether we like it or not. Perhaps it is time for us to change with it." She looked around at the other elders. "I say we allow the binding to proceed. Xander has proven himself to be honorable and useful. If Gretna wishes to bind herself to him, it is her choice." There was debate, but eventually the other elders agreed. Xander and Gretna would be allowed to bind themselves to each other, and Xander would be granted full membership in the clan. It was more than Xander had dared to hope for, and when he and Gretna left the council meeting, he pulled her into his arms and held her tight. "You would have left your home for me," he said wonderingly. "Of course I would have," she replied. "You left yours for me first." The binding ceremony took place a month later, in the height of summer. It was a traditional orc ceremony, with elements that Xander had to learn and practice. The ceremony itself was held at sunset in the central square, with the entire clan in attendance. Gretna wore a ceremonial vest decorated with intricate beadwork that her mother had made, and her hair was braided with ribbons of red and gold. Xander wore traditional orc clothing as well, feeling slightly self-conscious but determined to honor Gretna's culture. The ceremony involved exchanging vows before the clan elders, pledging loyalty and commitment to each other. Then they each gave the other a token, something personal and meaningful. Gretna gave Xander a knife that had belonged to her father, a beautifully crafted blade with a bone handle. Xander gave Gretna a silver pendant he had commissioned from the clan's metalsmith, engraved with the date he had first saved her life. "So I never forget the day my life truly began," he told her as he fastened it around her neck. She touched the pendant with tears in her eyes, then pulled him down for a kiss that was witnessed by the entire clan. There was cheering and applause, and then the celebration began. There was food and drink and music, and Xander found himself swept up in the festivities, welcomed fully into the clan for the first time. Later, as they lay together in the house they would now share, Gretna traced her fingers over the scar on his shoulder from an old injury. "Are you happy?" she asked quietly. "Happier than I ever thought I could be," he said honestly. "You?" "Yes." She was quiet for a moment, then said, "Do you ever regret leaving your old life?" Xander thought about it. He missed some things: the intellectual challenge of the medical college, the efficiency of having proper equipment and supplies. But when he weighed that against what he had now, the choice was easy. "No," he said. "I have everything I need right here." She smiled and kissed him again, and for a long time they did not talk at all. The seasons changed, summer fading into autumn and then winter. Xander settled fully into his life as the clan's healer, his skills earning him respect and gratitude from even the most skeptical clan members. He taught Mara and several other interested clan members advanced medical techniques, and in return, they taught him about herbal remedies and traditional healing practices that complemented his formal training. Gretna returned to her role as a warrior and scout, though she was more careful now, more aware of her mortality. She and Xander established a comfortable rhythm, her departures for scouting missions followed by joyful reunions, his long days in the clinic balanced by quiet evenings together. The war continued in the distant lowlands, but it seemed increasingly remote and irrelevant to their lives. Occasionally, refugees from other clans would arrive, displaced by the fighting, and Xander would treat their wounds and help them resettle. Each time, he was reminded of the world he had left behind, but he never regretted his choice. In the spring, Gretna told him she was pregnant. The news filled him with a complicated mix of joy and terror. He was going to be a father, which was wonderful and terrifying in equal measure. But he was also a doctor, and he knew the risks of pregnancy, particularly a cross-species pregnancy. There was so much he did not know about how human and orc physiology would interact, whether there would be complications, whether the child would be healthy. "Stop thinking like a doctor and start thinking like a father," Gretna told him when she saw the worry on his face. "Yes, there are unknowns, but we will figure it out together." She was right, of course. They sought advice from Mara and from the clan's midwives, and Xander pored over every medical text he had brought with him, looking for any information that might be relevant. The pregnancy progressed normally, and Gretna remained healthy and strong, though Xander fretted over every small symptom. Their daughter was born in late autumn, during the first snowfall of the year. The labor was long and difficult, and there were moments when Xander was terrified he would lose both Gretna and the baby. But Mara and the midwives were skilled, and Gretna was strong, and finally, the baby emerged, crying lustily. She was perfect. She had her mother's green skin, though a lighter shade, and small tusks that would grow as she got older. But she had Xander's eyes, blue instead of amber, and his dark hair. She was a beautiful blend of both her parents, proof that love could transcend even the boundaries of species. They named her Kella, after Gretna's grandmother. Xander held his daughter for the first time and felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. She was tiny and fragile and completely dependent on them, and he loved her with a fierceness that took his breath away. "She is beautiful," Gretna said, exhausted but radiant. "We made something beautiful." "We did," Xander agreed, unable to take his eyes off his daughter's face. The clan celebrated Kella's birth, and even the most skeptical members seemed to warm to the idea of a human orc child. She was healthy and strong, and she represented hope for a future where such unions might be accepted. As Kella grew, it became clear she had inherited the best traits of both her parents. She was curious and intelligent, with Xander's love of learning and Gretna's physical strength. She was also fearless, climbing everything she could reach and getting into trouble with impressive regularity. Xander and Gretna raised her together, teaching her about both human and orc cultures, making sure she understood both sides of her heritage. They told her stories about how they met, about the war and the choices they had made, about the importance of compassion and courage. Years passed. The war finally ended, not with a dramatic battle but with a slow, exhausted peace as both sides realized they had nothing left to gain from continued fighting. Borders were established, tentative trade agreements signed. The world was still divided, and prejudice still existed, but there was hope for something better. Xander and Gretna watched these changes from their mountain home, raising their daughter and serving their clan. They had 2 more children, a son named Ren who looked more human than orc, and another daughter named Lyra who was the perfect blend of both. Their family was large and chaotic and full of love. On the anniversary of the day, Xander had first saved Gretna's life. They took a walk up into the mountains, away from the village. They had made this pilgrimage every year since their binding, a private moment to remember where they had started. They sat on a ridge overlooking the valley, watching the sun set over the mountains. Kella was 12 now, Ren was 8, and Lyra was 5. Their life was full and rich, very different from anything Xander had imagined for himself during his days as a military surgeon. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you had not saved me?" Gretna asked, as she did every year. And as he did every year, Xander thought about it seriously before answering. "I think I would have continued being a military surgeon until the war ended, then probably opened a practice somewhere. I would have lived a comfortable, respectable life. I might have even been happy in a limited way." "But," Gretna prompted, "but I would never have known what I was missing. I would never have known you or our children or this life we have built. I would never have understood what it means to be truly happy." He took her hand, her strong, calloused hand that he loved. "Saving you was the best decision I ever made, and I have never regretted it for a single moment." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Good, because I plan to keep you around for a long time yet." "I am counting on it," he said, and kissed the top of her head. They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to come out. Two people from different worlds who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built something beautiful from it. The future was uncertain, as it always was, but they would face it together. And that was more than enough. Down in the village, their children played in the square, their laughter carrying on the evening breeze. Kella was teaching Ren and Lyra a complicated game that involved jumping over stones and counting in both human and orc languages. They were growing up in a world that was slowly learning to see beyond old prejudices, a world their parents had helped create simply by choosing love over hatred. Xander thought about the soldier he had been, the man who had stood in a battlefield hospital tent and made the decision to save an enemy's life. He had not known where that decision would lead, had not imagined the incredible journey it would set him on. But he would make the same choice again in a heartbeat. "What are you thinking about?" Gretna asked, sensing his reflective mood. "I am thinking about how one moment can change everything. How a single choice, made in the heat of the moment without time to think it through, can determine the entire course of your life. And are you satisfied with where that choice led you?" He pulled her closer, breathing in the familiar scent of her, feeling the solid warmth of her against his side. "More than satisfied. I am grateful every single day for the chance to build this life with you." She smiled, that beautiful smile that still made his heart skip a beat after all these years. "I am grateful too. You gave me my life back, Xander. Twice. Once on that operating table and once when you chose to come with me instead of staying with your own people. I will spend the rest of my life trying to be worthy of that." "You already are," he said simply. "You were from the moment you woke up and asked why I saved you. Your question made me think about who I wanted to be, what kind of person I wanted to be remembered as. And the answer was someone who chose compassion over convenience, who saw people as people rather than enemies. You helped me become that person." They sat together as the night deepened, wrapped in each other's warmth and the comfortable silence of people who knew each other deeply. Around them, the mountain wind whispered through the pines, carrying the sounds of the village below, the normal sounds of evening, families gathering for dinner, children being called in from play, the everyday miracles of ordinary life. Eventually, they rose and made their way back down the mountain path to their home. The lights were on in the windows, and they could see their children through the glass, Kella helping Mara set the table while Ren and Lyra argued about something in the loud, enthusiastic way of young siblings. "Home," Gretna said softly, and the word held a world of meaning. "Home," Xander agreed. They walked inside together, hand in hand. ready for whatever the future might bring, secure in the knowledge that they would face it as they had faced everything else since that night in the battlefield hospital together, with courage and love and an unwavering commitment to each other. The war that had brought them together was over, but their story was still being written, one day at a time, one moment of grace and connection at a time. And as Xander looked at his family gathered around the dinner table, at the life he and Gretna had built from the ashes of conflict and tragedy, he knew that every sacrifice had been worth it. He had saved her life on an operating table, and in doing so, she had saved his in return, pulling him out of the darkness of war and into the light of a new beginning. They had found each other across the divide of species and culture and old hatreds, and they had proven that love was stronger than all of it. Their children would grow up in a world that was slowly healing, slowly learning to see past the divisions that had caused so much pain. And perhaps someday, there would be many more families like theirs, families that bridged the gap between human and orc, families that proved peace was not just possible but beautiful. But even if that day never came, even if their family remained an anomaly, Xander knew their lives had meaning. They had chosen love in a world that told them to hate. They had chosen compassion in a world that demanded cruelty. They had chosen each other, again and again, through every challenge and hardship. And in the end, that was the only thing that truly mattered. The years continued to pass, seasons flowing into one another in the eternal rhythm of the mountains. Xander's clinic grew, and he trained several young orcs in advanced medical techniques, passing on his knowledge to a new generation. Some of his students were curious about human medicine, about the world beyond the mountains, and he encouraged that curiosity, hoping that their generation would build better bridges than his had managed. Gretna continued her work as a scout, though she took on more teaching responsibilities as she got older, training young warriors in the skills of tracking and survival. She was respected throughout the region, known for her wisdom and her unusual family, and other clans began to send their young people to train with her, intrigued by the woman who had bound herself to a human. Their children flourished. Kella grew into a thoughtful young woman with her father's scholarly inclinations and her mother's physical prowess. She was fascinated by the intersection of human and orc cultures, and spoke often of wanting to travel, to see both worlds and find ways to build connections between them. Ren was quieter, more introspective, but he had a gift for healing that reminded Xander of himself at that age. He spent hours in his father's clinic, learning everything he could, and it was clear he would follow in Xander's footsteps. Lyra was the firecracker of the family, bold and adventurous, always getting into some kind of trouble and always talking her way out of it with a combination of charm and quick thinking. She reminded Xander of Gretna when she was younger, and he suspected his youngest daughter would have stories to tell that would rival her mother's. One evening, when Kella was 16, she came to Xander with a question that had clearly been weighing on her mind. They were sitting in his clinic, organizing supplies together, a routine they had established when she was younger and that they both still enjoyed. "Father," she began, then paused, organizing her thoughts. "When you saved Mother's life, did you know it would change everything? Did you have any idea where that decision would lead?" Xander considered the question carefully, wanting to give her an honest answer. "No," he said finally. "I had no idea. In that moment, I was just thinking about keeping her alive. I was not thinking about the consequences or the future. I was certainly not imagining that I would end up here with a family and a new life. I was just doing what I thought was right." "But you risked everything," Kella pressed. "Your career, your safety, everything. How did you know it was worth it?" "I did not know," Xander admitted. "That is the thing about the important decisions in life, Kella. You rarely have all the information you need. You just have to trust your instincts and your values, and then live with the consequences. I believed that saving a life was more important than following orders or protecting my own position. I believed that compassion was more important than tribalism. And once I made that choice, every other choice followed naturally. Kella was quiet for a moment, turning this over in her mind. "I want to go to the human territories," she said finally. "I want to attend one of their universities, learn about medicine and science the way you did, but I am afraid of how they will treat me there. I am not fully orc or fully human. I do not know if I will belong in either world." Xander's heart ached for his daughter, understanding her fear because he had felt it himself. "You will face prejudice," he said honestly. "Both worlds have people who will not accept you, who will see only what you are not rather than what you are. But you will also find people like your mother and me, people who see beyond those surface differences to the person underneath. The question is whether the knowledge and experience you will gain is worth the struggle." "I think it is," Kella said quietly. "I want to be like you, Father. I want to be someone who chooses compassion over convenience, who builds bridges instead of walls. But I can only do that if I understand both worlds." Pride swelled in Xander's chest. His daughter had inherited the best parts of both her parents, and she was ready to forge her own path. "Then go," he said. "Go with our blessing and our support. Learn everything you can and then come back and teach us. Be the bridge we need." Kella hugged him tightly, and Xander held his daughter close, knowing he was watching her take the first step on a journey that would define her life. When he told Gretna about the conversation later that night, she was quiet for a long time. "Our children will face challenges we never imagined," she said finally. "They are something new, something the world is not ready for. I worry about them." "I do too," Xander admitted. "But I also have faith in them. They are strong and smart and compassionate. They will find their way. Because we taught them well. Because they are your children," Xander said with a smile, "which means they are stubborn and brave and incapable of backing down from a challenge." Gretna laughed and swatted his arm playfully. "I was trying to have a serious moment, and you ruin it with flattery. It is not flattery if it is true." She kissed him, a long, lingering kiss that still had the power to make him forget everything else. "I love you, Xander Owens. Even after all these years, I love you more than I thought it was possible to love someone." "The feeling is mutual," he said softly. "Every single day, the feeling is mutual." Kella did go to the human territories, enrolled in a medical college with Xander's help and letters of recommendation. The first year was difficult, full of challenges and prejudice, but she persevered and eventually, her skill and knowledge won over even the most skeptical professors. She became the first half-orc to graduate from a human medical college, and her achievement made news throughout the territories, sparking conversations about integration and equality that were long overdue. Ren followed a different path, staying in the mountains and building on his father's legacy, expanding the clan's medical facilities and training programs. He had a gentle manner that put even the most nervous patients at ease, and he became beloved in the community. Lyra, true to her adventurous nature, became a trader and diplomat, traveling between human and orc territories, building commercial relationships and slowly, carefully, creating networks of connection that might someday lead to lasting peace. She had a gift for negotiation, and a charm that transcended species barriers. Xander and Gretna watched their children grow and flourish, watched them take the lessons they had learned and use them to change the world in small but meaningful ways. It was more than they had hoped for, proof that their unlikely union had created something that mattered. On the 20th anniversary of the day, Xander had saved Gretna's life. The clan held a celebration in their honor. It was not something either of them had requested, but the clan elders insisted, saying that their story had become an important part of the clan's identity. A reminder that change was possible, that old hatreds did not have to define the future. The celebration was held in the central square, with food and music and speeches. Clan members spoke about what Xander and Gretna had meant to the community, about the ways their example had opened minds and hearts. Even Dragath, who had been so skeptical at first, spoke movingly about how his sister's courage had taught him to question his own prejudices. When it was Xander's turn to speak, he stood before the assembled clan, Gretna at his side, and felt the weight of the moment. These people had taken him in when he had nowhere else to go, had accepted him despite every reason to turn him away. They had become his family in every way that mattered. 20 years ago, he began, his voice carrying across the square, I made a decision that changed my life. I chose to save the life of someone I was supposed to consider an enemy. I did not make that choice because I was brave or particularly enlightened. I made it because, in that moment, I could not do anything else. I looked at Gretna, bleeding and dying on my operating table, and I saw a person who deserved to live. Everything else, all the complications and consequences, came later. He paused, looking at the faces watching him, orc faces that had become as familiar as his own reflection. Since that day, I have learned more about courage and compassion than I ever learned in my years of medical training. I have learned that family is not about blood or species, but about the bonds we choose to forge. I have learned that home is not a place but a feeling, a sense of belonging that comes from being truly seen and accepted. And I have learned that love, real love, is the most powerful force in the world, capable of transcending every barrier and healing every wound. He turned to Gretna, taking her hand. You asked me once why I saved you. I gave you the simple answer then, the one about being a doctor and saving lives. But the real answer is more complicated. I saved you because some part of me recognized you, recognized the possibility of what we could become together. I saved you because the world needed people like you in it, people who are strong and brave and unflinchingly honest. I saved you because, even though I did not know it yet, I was already falling in love with you. There were tears on Gretna's face and on many of the faces in the crowd. She squeezed his hand tightly, then turned to address the clan herself. I asked Xander why he saved me because I truly did not understand. In my world, in the world I had known, enemies did not show mercy. Humans did not help orcs. But Xander showed me that the world could be different, that people could choose compassion over hatred. He gave me my life back, and then he gave me a new life, one richer and more meaningful than anything I had imagined possible. He is the best person I know, and I am grateful every day that he chose to save me, and then chose to stay with me. The celebration continued late into the night, but eventually Xander and Gretna slipped away, walking hand in hand through the quiet village to their home. They stood outside for a moment, looking up at the stars. 20 years, Gretna said softly. It feels like a lifetime and like yesterday all at once. I know what you mean, Xander replied. Sometimes I still dream about that night in the hospital tent, about the moment you woke up and asked me that question. It feels like that was the moment my real life began. Mine too, she said, then smiled. Though I could have done without the massive abdominal wound, he laughed. Yes, I suppose that part was less than ideal. They went inside to the home they had built together, filled with the accumulated memories of 2 decades of shared life. And as they settled in for the night, Xander felt a profound sense of contentment, a deep satisfaction with the life they had created. The war that had brought them together was long over, but its lessons remained. They had learned that peace was always possible, that compassion could triumph over hatred, that love could bridge any divide. These were not easy lessons, and they had paid a price for learning them. But the life they had built, the family they had raised, the community they had helped transform, all of it was worth every sacrifice. Xander had saved Gretna's life on an operating table in a battlefield hospital, a simple act of medical care that had somehow become the foundation of everything that mattered. He had not known in that moment what he was starting. He had just known it was the right thing to do. And in the end, that was enough. That had always been enough. The story of how a war surgeon saved an orc enemy and built a life beyond the boundaries of prejudice and hatred was told and retold in the mountains, becoming a legend that inspired others to question their own assumptions, to look past surface differences to the people underneath. It was a story about the power of one person's choice to change everything, about the courage it takes to stand by your convictions even when the world tells you you are wrong. But for Xander and Gretna, it was simply their life, their love story, the foundation of the family and community they had built together. And as they lay together in the darkness, listening to the familiar sounds of their home, they knew that they had found something precious and rare, something worth every struggle and sacrifice. They had found each other, across all the barriers that should have kept them apart, and they had built something beautiful. And that, in the end, was the greatest miracle of all.